Okay, this is part 2. Spoken language competency. Baby beats adult. Why? Part 2. I received feedback from part 1's video. I received feedback from one person. Loved it. Using it to revise what I'm going to say right now. But first, a disclaimer. This video series may never provide an answer to the question that the titular question of questions. I don't know. I know for a fact this video will not end with an answer to the question of why babies achieve spoken competence in a language better than adults. I know this video won't end with it. The entire series may not either. That's the nature of the question that I'm asking, I'm trying to answer, is there may not be an answer. So, sorry if you want there to be one. Don't know if it's ever going to happen. My gut reaction says it will, but since you don't share the same gut as I do, I have to have this disclaimer to bring you to make sure your expectations are good or in line with me. Another disclaimer. I am treating native language acquisition on the same level as second language acquisition so that I can put adults and babies in the same playing field. I know this will piss so native being first language, I know this will piss so many people off, because people really hold it dearly, the knowledge that they have that babies and adults are completely different. And I'm fully aware that they are completely different. I know that a baby starts out life with a brain that is not the same as that same baby's brain when it's an adult. I know that has billions more, I don't even care the number, just many more neurons than that baby will then eventually have as an adult. And so there's obviously something going on that allows for the baby to ease into spoken language competency as the brain developed. I know that babies reach competent in their native language between the years of 2 and 3. I know all that, but I can't keep these two worlds, adults and babies, separate in order for me to answer this question. Just can't do it. Once I provide something that brings peace to my gut, then I will start revising it with all this other data. But for the time being, I have to treat both of them on the same level, and I have to treat second language acquisition and first language acquisition on the same level. And it's not that hard to just deal with that, because think about it. Although a baby's brain is different than its adult version, in some respect, it's still a brain. So it's not like it's a completely different species of a brain. It's not like it's a completely different human's brain. It's the same brain, just a little different in a way that similar to its body is the same body, just a little different. Some more muscle, a little bit more developed, a bit more impervious to the elements, but still the same body, genetically, in every way. So it's not huge to put them on the same level, whether they're learning their first language or learning a second language after learning their first one as an adult. It's not huge. It's not like this jump from trying to explain why cats are different from dogs. Okay, it's not the same thing. We're talking about the same individual. So, with that aside, why do babies... Last video I was exploring thinking. And so I'm going to explore that a bit more deeper right now. Not that much deeper, because this is ridiculous stuff. This is not easy to deal with. But I'm going to add the comment that Laurel Rogers gave me, which is nonverbal communication. I'm going to fit that into this. But first I have to first I have to explain where babies and where their adult self are starting when they're beginning to learn how to speak in their language. Babies, so I'm going to first explain the starting point for a baby and then the starting point for an adult. A baby starts learning its first language using exclusively the spoken word, while an adult starts learning a second language, but again, for intents and purposes, they're the exact same thing, using almost exclusively the written word. The thing is, the adult has the option of both spoken and written word, but since the majority of second language learning occurs not in a context where that language is being learned, a lot of it, we just have more access to the written word than we do the spoken word. So, I know a lot of people are like, no, I gotta ignore all this. And in my head, I'm just imagining all these people saying, yeah, but EFL versus ESL, you don't understand the difference. I'm like, just ignore the noise. Ignore the noise. Continue, James. Continue. Adult starts out with adult uses the majority is written. The majority for baby is spoken. Not in the majority. That's it. The baby only uses spoken. So then I'm basically going to just start in the same way. Adults use written. Babies use spoken. Next, what type of thinking do you need when you're using these two forms? Well, let's first define what written and spoken word is to the best of my ability. Spoken word is an utterance. So the shape of a spoken word can be as long as an entire sentence, can be as long as an entire thought, idea. It could be a minute of just straight spokenness, or it can be as short as a couple of seconds. There is no defined shape yet, actually, for the spoken word, which is why this is a little difficult to explore. While the written word is precisely defined. The written word is the spoken utterance from one space, the space prior to the written word and the space after the written word. That's the written word. That is the shape. So it's like the atom of language that we have. The smallest, most defined shape you can get. That's the written word. And that's what adults use. While a baby uses a spoken word, which can be anything from that to something as long as an entire utterance. So for intents and purposes, we're going to say that the baby uses, so we're going to say that the spoken word is an indiscernible string of sound. So a giant chunk. While the spoken word is really the smallest, the most defined, smallest chunk of sound that we have in existence. That's the written word. So, how does a baby, starting with this giant chunk of sound, get meaning out of it, eventually learn how to speak with that being the only thing it uses? And how does an adult, starting with the smallest, learn how to speak? That being the only thing it uses. This is where the thinking comes into play. There's top to bottom being the complete sound, the complete utterance being the top, and the bottom being the smallest utterance being at the bottom. Since a baby's starting at the top, it needs to use top-bottom thinking, which is deductive thinking. Since the adults are starting at the bottom, it needs to use bottom-top thinking, which is inductive thinking. The adult needs to induce a spoken utterance, induce a spoken utterance, induce a way of communicating its emotion via a spoken utterance from varying chunks of sound that are really small. Similar to how a researcher uses inductive thinking for qualitative research predominantly, by getting into a performance context, getting into a context and just experiencing all these things, and then taking all these random experiences and emotions and visual representations of the context and making meaning out of it. While a quantitative, okay, I'm not going to explore that too much, because my gut reaction is to say then quantitative is top bottom, which I think it is, but I don't want to try to explain it right now. So, that being their starting point. Baby's up here. Baby's up here. This is what the baby has. It needs to work down. We're going to say that spoken competence is when the baby is now down here. Baby now understands the smallest possible shape of the spoken word being the written word. Adults, on the other hand, start there. So they are trying to get where the baby starts, where the baby is. So adults are taking the smallest possible shape the spoken word can take, which is the written word, and they're trying to string it together slowly to the point where they have the utterance that they need. What is the step? What's the next step? How does a baby go from here? Obviously, a baby doesn't go from here to here. It's impossible. You can't do that. It's too big of a jump. So how does a baby go from here just a little bit shorter? Just one step closer to here. And then how does an adult go from here one step closer to here? How does it do that? That's the next step, and that's the final part of this. I'm going to end on this. Adults use syntax, grammar, linguistic tools. Babies use non-verbal communication. And then I'll explain how that works. So, just imagine an adult has just all these little words, just word all over the place, right? It has to string these written words together into a string of sound that best represents the emotion that it wants to get out. So the natural way, using inductive thinking, the natural way to do that is to use grammar to string it together. So it does that. But what often happens is it makes lots of mistakes in the process. But we'll explore that later. So that's the next step. The next step is to use grammar to string it together. So it starts really small. It learns how to just say the most simple things. The cat is red. Something like that. Or whatever the language, whatever the grammar is of the language. It starts really, really small. Takes 4 words, strings it together, and that clearly doesn't represent an emotion, but it's a step closer. And that's the process the typical process that an adult takes. While a baby has it's given that entire thing. It's giving the desired string of sound that the adult wants. That's what the baby's given from its caretaker and whatnot. So how does a baby make sense of that? Right? Has to somehow break it down into smaller and smaller bits. Well, the first step, as I said, nonverbal communication. See, the baby has to somehow take this. So right now, we're not even talking about phonetical or allophonic differences right now. The baby's not even assessing the sounds at this point. Okay? It can't. There's too many of them. It would be overwhelmed trying to understand each sound of the verbal utterance it receives when it cries, or when it's tired. Whenever it expresses some type of need, it receives this verbal utterance from its caretaker. It doesn't assess each phonetic sound at that moment. Can't. Brain just too overwhelming. As adult would be if it was in a similar situation. So the way it does it is by just categorizing each utterance into putting it into some emotional category in its brain. And it does this using nonverbal communication. So what the caretaker, what the thing giving this baby this verb, this spoken word, what it is not, what is communicating via non-verbals. So facial expressions, posture, and sixth sense type of emotional communication. So the baby's like, oh, this string of sound is positively correlated to what I need, or negatively correlated to what I need. If the string of sound is a result of the baby crying because it's hungry, right? Baby cries because it's hungry. Then caretaker comes, says something, blah, and then this blah results in food. Then the baby's like, ooh, that blah is positively correlated to hunger. So now it's been, in that case, it's not nonverbal communication. In that case, it just receives food as a result of. So that's nonverbal communication. The action of receiving food is a nonverbal communication. So that's one form too. Well, there's other forms of nonverbal communication, facial expressions, like I said. So in other words, it's just nonverbal communication. It gets that, categorizes it, and it stays in the brain. So then it has categories of all these long utterances of verb. This long utterance is categorized as positively correlated, and this long utterance is categorized as negatively correlated. Good, bad, happy, sad, I want it, I don't want it, etc. Right now we're just going to do positive, negative. That's the easiest way to do it. And then it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller from there. I'm not going to explore that right now. I'm ending it with that. Whether you like it or not, that's all you get. Because I don't know, I do know how to take it from there, but I'm not comfortable enough to do it right now. I need to think more. But I'm happy with that. That satisfies my gut. Nonverbal communication is the first step for babies. Syntax is the first step for adults. Babies are better than adults at gaining spoken competency. Okay? Still, there's no contradictions that I can think of. If there are, bring them forward. Love you all. Bye-bye.